Be honest, how much time have you spent mixing? Tweaking EQ curves, chasing the perfect kick, trying to get your snare tight, fighting with hi-hats that are just not sitting right and bass that's muddy. Days? Weeks? Months? Just polishing the same tiny details over and over again, but your tracks don't sound the way you want them to when you compare them to commercially released music. And you're probably thinking, DJs will only play my tracks if the mix and masters sound tight, professional. Labels will only sign me if everything sounds flawless. People will only like my music if it's polished to professional standards. I can't release this until it's perfect. That's why so many producers sit on tracks for months, sometimes years, while their fan base and career never grows. Here's the truth. Mixing isn't what separates forgettable tracks from unforgettable ones. Because if the idea isn't strong, if it doesn't carry emotion, a message, a story, or is captivating, then no amount of compression or balancing is going to make anybody care. I'm Johnny, otherwise known as Marksman from Marksman's Producer Academy. I have 2 decades of production and songwriting experience. I'm a DJ and a coach. Personally, I've had 2 Beatport #1s, millions of streams, and signed to labels like Sakura and Purified. The only reason why I actually ever got to this stage was because I stopped obsessing over the mixdown and trying to get things perfect and focusing on more important things like the songwriting, the musicality, and storytelling. I've taught this to hundreds of producers, and it changes everything. So in this video, I'm going to show why mixing isn't your biggest problem and what actually matters most if you want to create music DJs want to play, labels want to sign, and fans binge over and over again. Some of the most legendary songs ever made, think about from the 60s, the 70s, and even the 90s, those songs would be considered terrible mixes by today's standards. And yes, the technology back then wasn't what it is today, but this is the point. These tracks have stood the test of time. Why? Because the ideas were unforgettable. They were good songs. That's what matters. Some of the biggest bands in history, like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and Metallica, if you listen back to the records that they released in their early times, those old recordings sound thin, harsh, muddy. Sometimes the drums are panned all the way to the left in certain Beatles songs. And technically, that would never pass today's standards. People still listen to them decades later. They're selling tickets to their shows, packing out stadiums because their ideas were timeless. That's what actually carries them, not the mix nor the master. Even in the electronic space, if you listen to trance classics from the late 90s and early 2000s, by today's standards, nowhere near modern electronic music. But people still drop those tracks in sets every single day. It's about the emotion, the message, and the musicality. This myth of the perfect mix doesn't hold up because there's no such thing as a flawless mix. Every record you love is full of compromises, flashing frequencies, little imperfections, things which didn't quite gel together perfectly. That's normal and to be expected. The goal isn't perfection because perfection doesn't exist. The goal is good enough to get the job done, because good enough and released is better than perfect and stuck on your hard drive. You don't need crazy gear to make something that bangs, you just need the right idea captured in the right way. Mixing can always be improved later. You can always fix technical issues. Mixing and mastering engineers, that's why they exist, by the way, and polish your sounds. And the thing is, if a label really loves your track, they'll give feedback specifically on the mix or offer to mix it for you because they care about the song first. They have in-house mixing engineers specifically for this occasion. But if you've never received that feedback, then clearly it's not the mix that's the problem. And this is where most producers get stuck. They spend all this energy polishing the surface when what actually matters is the composition, emotion, story, message, melody, musicality. Get that right, and people will care before it's polished. That's the important part. Look at Ben Pierce and his track What I Might Do. That record started as a bedroom demo with just laptop, cheap monitors, stock Ableton tools. His exact words were, the mix wasn't great, but the groove and the vocal was something undeniable. One of his friends played it in the car whilst picking up Solomon from the airport. Solomon instantly wanted to know what it was and who it was. That demo ended up getting signed, polished, and becoming a global hit. But even a super rough demo, that song carried. The fans of the music are the same, right? Most don't even have the language to consciously describe a bad mix. They're not analyzing your EQ or concerned if the bass is muddy or whatever. They're asking, Does this make me feel something? Does this make me want to move? Unless your track is literally painful to listen to, nobody cares whether you use FabFilter or Ableton Stock EQ, or if the snare's a little bit buried. So if it's not the mix that makes people care, then what does? Let's dig deeper into what makes a track stand out. It comes down to the idea, a strong hook, a clear story, emotion people can feel, and a message that people can relate to. This is what makes music stick. The hook can be a vocal, a melody, a signature, unique, interesting sound. But here's the test, right? Imagine you and your friends go to the club, hear an unbelievably good song, and don't have your phones. How do you remember it? You don't sing the kick, you don't hum the bass line, you sing the melody, the vocal, the hook. That's what people remember. If you ever had anybody say, have you heard this song? They sing the lyrics, the vocals, straight away. That's how important this is. That's what people remember. And that's why so many technical, solid tracks, especially in genres like minimal house or tech house, come and go. No hate on those genres, by the way, but something might sound awesome in the club, but it's very forgettable because thousands of these tracks drop every week. Grooving drums, fine mix, huge bass line, but nothing really memorable. They've got a short shelf life and are replaceable. However, the tracks that last for decades, they've got unforgettable hooks, stories, emotions baked in, and those are the ones that people are still singing, like all those trance classics from the 90s, like Isla, Tauscher remix, Children by Robert Miles, just to name a few. Those tracks are still played every single day, today, in current DJ sets. And there's a reason for that. Because amazing story, amazing melody, amazing emotion. Do you want to make music that's got a short shelf life? Particularly when you might be spending hours, weeks, or even months making a track just for it to be forgotten instantly. Now, think about it with pop music. The best songs, people are singing the hook before the track even ends. I've seen this happen with my own music too, this time when I played it in the club. People literally singing along to the hook for the very first time they ever heard it. They never heard the track before. And that's when you know you've smashed it. Now, that's of course easier said than done. It's very hard to do. If nobody's ever doing that with your music, the problem isn't your mix, it's your hooks. The storytelling in the arrangement, creating tension and release, contrast, building expectation and delivering payoff. That's what makes people lose it on the dance floor. Great producers are great storytellers. And here's something that no one talks about. The way you get good isn't by sitting on one track for 6 months. It's by finishing tracks again and again. Because every time you finish, you learn patterns, you practice skills that you'll never practice if you're stuck in the loop and on the same track, such as arrangement, automation, sound design, voicing, and many more. And the truth is, the decisions you're making right at the start in the early phases are going to determine if the track will work down the line, such as correct voicing, sound selection, the sequencing of the parts when they play in time, choosing sounds that sit in the right register, leaving space, making sure the parts don't clash. It makes mixing so simple because it just works without over-processing. It just sounds good before you even put on any of the polish. The best tracks are simple, with fewer elements, each with space, each telling a story, evolving over time, and hooking the listener in, with subtle changes over time, and more drastic ones towards transitions and moments of high tension. That's why understanding the why behind this principle matters. It makes you a better producer, not just a better mixer. And one of our students, Chris, when we started working together, he would be obsessing over the mix down for weeks and months on a single track. The actual problem was he had so many conflicting parts, like multiple melodies all fighting for your attention with vocals at the same time, like multiple different layers of sounds which all were just conflicting. And once we said to him, hey man, this is a compositional problem, not a mixing problem. Well, it's both. Sure, the mix is a problem, but the cause is not your lack of mixing skills. The actual composition is causing this issue because you have about 3 lead melodies playing at the same time. It's very confusing for the listener. And once we started stripping it back with him, his mix already sounded better because there are fewer things playing at the same time and fighting for the same space. When you understand correct instrument registering, where to put them within the space, and also like from a compositional standpoint, if you don't have everything playing at the same time, then it's way easier for it to sound good and tight. Prevention is so much better than fixing later down the line. And because of this, Chris is now able to blast out a track a week without having to worry about the mix. And as a result, his mixes have become better. Chris thought his problem was mixing, but actually it's a compositional problem. That in turn fixes the mix. And that in turn makes it easier to fix your mixing problems once you get better at mixing. But if you're trying to mix an absolute bomb site of a project, then yeah, it's going to be difficult. But strip it back, focus on what actually matters. It's so much easier. And most producers are staying stuck because they're obsessing over mixing because that feels safe to them. You can measure it. You can buy another plugin that's going to help. You can convince yourself you're improving. But deep down, it's avoidance. It's easier to tweak a snare for weeks than admit that, hey, this track isn't that good from an idea perspective. Most producers don't even realize this is the problem. I know because every year I speak to tens of thousands of producers. The number one thing that they say, mixing is my biggest problem. But when I hear their tracks, yeah, the mix isn't great, but the real issue is always the same. Weak ideas, no emotion, no storytelling, no tension and release. The arrangements are messy and super cluttered. There's too much for the listener to actually focus on. This is why perfection is dangerous, because you're telling yourself, I can't release until it's perfect. And because it's never perfect, you'll never release anything. You hide in mixing because it feels safer than actually facing the uncomfortable work and the uncomfortable truth. You need to learn how to write better melodies and hooks, how to tell stories, and how to actually finish tracks. And here's the kicker. People happily spend hundreds or thousands on plugins or mixing courses, but they rarely actually invest in skills that really move the needle. Idea generation, composition, arrangement, storytelling, theory. This is where real growth is because, yeah, mixing is important, sure. We teach it too, but mixing can only polish what's already there. I'm sure you know the analogy, you can't polish a turd. The moment you stop hiding in mixing and start putting your energy into learning the skills such as finishing more tracks, writing better hooks, telling stories, conveying messages, creating emotion, tension and release for your listeners, that's when things start to click and you can start releasing and growing an audience rather than hiding behind perfectionism and not getting anything done. And yeah, even then you will probably need some help. That's why we built our system. So you don't waste years stuck in the wrong battles and focus on what matters. Mixing is important, but it's not the real bottleneck. The real bottleneck is your ideas, hooks, storytelling, message. That's what DJs, these labels, fans actually care about. Mixing can always be polished and fixed later, but nobody can fix a track that doesn't resonate with people or doesn't make people move. If you've been stuck obsessing over plugins, EQ curves, hopefully now you see that that's not what's holding you back. Focus on finishing tracks, writing better hooks, creating emotional journeys that resonate with your audience. That's when things are going to change. This is part 2 of our 6-part series on the self-sufficient artist system. In the next video, we're going to talk about why most producers destroy their own tracks by overproducing and how to avoid it. If you don't want to waste years figuring this out, hit the link in the description, DM us the code X22 on Instagram. Make sure you follow us first. That's where we work directly with producers, showing them exactly how to make the music they're capable of and get it heard by the right audience. Check that out in the description. See you in the next video, and if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe.